What if the most dangerous weapon in the room wasn't a sword? What if the person who changed the course of an entire nation's history wasn't a king, wasn't a general, wasn't even a soldier, but a woman standing quietly at the entrance of a tent, holding nothing but a cup of milk? This is not a story about power the way the world defines it. This is a story about courage that doesn't look like courage, about faith that doesn't announce itself, about a moment so unexpected, so sudden, so completely outside of what anyone could have planned, that the only explanation left is God. Stay with this story, because before it ends, you're going to see something that will change the way you think about your own life. The land of...
If you're enjoying this, I encourage you to subscribe. Go ahead and click that button right there. It just takes a second, and it really helps the channel.
Canaan. Roughly 1,200 years before the birth of Jesus Christ. The air is thick with dust and the smell of burning. Villages lie in ruin. Fields that once fed families are scorched and empty. Children cry in the dark. Mothers hold them close and whisper prayers they're not sure anyone is hearing. Israel is suffering. For 20 long years, the people of God have lived under the crushing weight of oppression. Their oppressor? A Canaanite king named Jabin, the king of Hazor, and his weapon of terror? A military commander so feared, so powerful, so seemingly unstoppable, that his very name made grown men tremble. His name was Sisera.
Destroy them all!
Sisera commanded 900 iron chariots. 900. In a time when most soldiers fought on foot with basic weapons, iron chariots were the ancient equivalent of tanks rolling across a battlefield. They were fast, they were deadly, they were almost impossible to stop. And for 20 years, Sisera had used them to crush Israel, to humiliate them, to remind them over and over again that they were weak, that they were helpless, that no one was coming to save them. But here's what Sisera didn't know. God had not forgotten his people. In the hill country of Ephraim, under a palm tree, a woman sat and listened. Her name was Deborah. She was a prophetess, a judge, a woman to whom the people of Israel came when they needed wisdom, when they needed justice, when they needed to hear from God. And in a time when Israel had no king, when the nation was fractured and afraid, Deborah was the voice that cut through the noise. She was not loud, she was not boastful, but when she spoke, people listened. Because when Deborah spoke, it felt like God was speaking. And one day, God did speak. He gave Deborah a message, a command, a word that would set everything in motion. She sent for a man named Barak, a military leader from the tribe of Naphtali, a man who had the skill to lead an army, but perhaps not yet the faith to believe it could win. When Barak arrived, Deborah looked at him and delivered the word of the Lord. Go, take 10,000 men from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun, march to Mount Tabor. I will draw Sisera, his chariots, his army, to the Kishon River, and I will give him into your hands. The command was clear. The promise was direct. God himself was saying, I will deliver your enemy to you. But Barak hesitated. Think about that for a moment. God just told this man, through his own prophet, that victory was guaranteed, that the most feared military commander in the region would be handed over to him, that the battle was already won before it began. And Barak paused. Have you ever been there? Have you ever stood at the edge of something God was clearly calling you to do and felt your feet refuse to move? Have you ever heard a promise from God and thought, but what if it doesn't work out for me? Barak looked at Deborah and said something that revealed everything about where his faith was. "If you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I won't go." He needed a human presence to make him feel safe enough to trust a divine promise. Deborah didn't shame him. She didn't mock him, but she did tell him the truth. "Very well, I will go with you, but because of the way you are going about this, the honor will not be yours. The Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." A woman, not a general, not a warrior, not a king, a woman. Barak didn't fully understand what that meant yet. Neither did Sisera, neither did anyone, but God already knew exactly who he was talking about. Barak gathered his army, 10,000 men from Naphtali and Zebulun. They marched to Mount Tabor, just as God had commanded. And Deborah went with them, the prophetess, the judge, the voice of God walking into the valley of war. Word reached Sisera quickly. Israel was mobilizing. Barak was moving. The people who had been crushed under his boot for 20 years were daring to rise. Sisera didn't panic. Why would he? He had 900 iron chariots. He had a battle-hardened army. He had never lost. He called his forces together and marched them to the Kishon River, the very place God had already chosen as the site of his destruction. He didn't know he was walking into a trap set not by men, but by God. The morning of the battle arrived, and then Deborah turned to Barak and said words that should have made every soldier's heart catch fire. "Go! This is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you? Has not the Lord gone ahead of you? Not maybe, not try your best, not good luck. The Lord has already gone ahead." Barak charged down from Mount Tabor, 10,000 men behind him. And something happened on that battlefield that no military strategist could have predicted. The Lord threw Sisera and all his chariots and all his army into confusion. The Kishon River, which had perhaps been calm before, suddenly surged. The ground became soft and treacherous. Those 900 iron chariots, the very weapons that had terrorized Israel for 20 years, became useless. They sank. They got stuck. They couldn't move. The army that had seemed invincible was suddenly helpless. Barak's men swept through them. The Bible says that Sisera's entire army fell by the sword. Not one man was left. 900 chariots, thousands of soldiers, gone in a single day. Because when God decides to move, no weapon formed against his people can stand. But Sisera himself, the commander, the man at the center of all this terror, he didn't die on the battlefield. He ran. The great Sisera, the man who had made Israel tremble for 20 years. The man with 900 iron chariots. He abandoned his chariot. He abandoned his army. He ran on foot, alone, desperate, terrified, looking for somewhere to hide. And he found what he thought was safety. He came to the tent of a woman named Jael. Now you need to understand something about this moment. Jael was the wife of Heber the Kenite, and the Kenites had a peace treaty with King Jabin, Sisera's king. So in Sisera's mind, this was a safe place. These were friendly people. He could rest here. He could hide here. No one would look for him here. He was wrong. Jael came out to meet him. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She looked at this feared, exhausted, desperate man and she said calmly, "Come in, my lord. Come in. Don't be afraid." She brought him inside the tent. She covered him with a blanket. He was shaking. from exhaustion, from fear, from the shock of defeat. He looked up at her and said, "I'm thirsty. Please give me some water." She opened a skin of milk. She gave him milk to drink. She covered him again. And then he said, "Stand at the entrance of the tent. If anyone comes and asks if there is a man here, say no." He closed his eyes. He was so sure he was safe. He fell into a deep, exhausted sleep. And now, we reach the moment. The moment that Deborah's prophecy had been pointing to all along. The moment that would end the war. Jael moved quietly. She picked up a tent peg, the kind used to anchor the ropes of a tent to the ground. She picked up a hammer, and with steady hands and a resolved heart, she drove the tent peg through the temple of Sisera while he slept. He died, the most feared military commander in the region, the man with 900 iron chariots, the man who had oppressed God's people for 20 years, killed not on a battlefield, not by a warrior, not by a sword, by a tent peg, in a quiet tent, by a woman named Jael. When Barak arrived, still pursuing Sisera, still searching for him, Jael walked out to meet him. "Come," she said, "I will show you the man you are looking for." And there he was, Sisera, dead. The war was over. Deborah's prophecy had come true in every detail. God had delivered Sisera into the hands of a woman. Not the woman anyone expected, not in the way anyone imagined, but exactly as God had said. Think about what just happened. God used a river that flooded at the right moment. He used 10,000 ordinary men who were afraid but willing. He used a prophetess who sat under a palm tree. He used a general who needed someone to hold his hand. And he used a woman in a tent. A woman with no army, no title, no weapon except what was already in her hands. God doesn't need the most powerful person in the room. He needs the willing one. After the battle, Deborah and Barak sang a song of praise to God. It's one of the oldest recorded songs in the entire Bible. And in that song, Jael is honored. She is called most blessed of women. Not the general, not the prophet, not the king, the woman with the tent peg. Because she saw the moment. She recognized what God was doing, and she acted. The Bible tells us that after this, the land had peace for 40 years. 40 years of peace. After 20 years of suffering, after a single day of battle, after one quiet moment in a tent, 40 years of peace. That is what happens when God moves. So what does this story mean for you today? First, God sees his people even when they feel forgotten. Israel cried out to God for 20 years. 20 years of silence, or what felt like silence, but God was not absent. He was not ignoring them. He was preparing. He was positioning. He was already setting in motion a plan that would use a prophetess, a reluctant general, a flooding river, and a woman with a tent peg to bring complete deliverance. If you are in a season that feels like God has gone quiet, hold on. He has not forgotten you. He is working in ways you cannot yet see. Second, God often uses the unexpected. No one would have written Jael into the battle plan. No one would have looked at her and said, "She's the one who will end the war." But God did. He always has. He used a shepherd boy to defeat a giant. He used a young girl to carry the Savior of the world. He used a fisherman to build his church. And he can use you exactly as you are, with exactly what you have, to do something that will outlast your lifetime. Third, courage doesn't always look like courage. Barak needed someone beside him to move. Jael acted in a moment of quiet resolve with nothing but what was in her tent. Neither of them looked like a hero from the outside, but both of them said yes when it mattered. Sometimes faith doesn't roar. Sometimes it just moves, quietly, steadily, in the direction God is pointing. Fourth, the enemy's greatest weapon can become his greatest weakness. Sisera's chariots were his power. But when God moved, those chariots became useless. The very thing that made him feel invincible became the thing that trapped him. Whatever is being used against you right now, whatever feels like an unstoppable force in your life, God can turn it. He can make the weapon fail. He can make the river rise. He can make the ground give way beneath the thing that has been crushing you. And here is where this story points beyond itself. Centuries after Jael drove that tent peg, another unlikely person would bring final deliverance to God's people. Not through violence, but through sacrifice. Not through a tent peg, but through nails driven into wood. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, came not as a conquering general, but as a servant. He came not to be served, but to give his life. And through his death and resurrection, he defeated the greatest enemy of all. Not a Canaanite king, not a military commander, but sin and death themselves. The victory was won in the most unexpected way imaginable, just like it always is with God. Sisera ran from the battlefield, looking for safety. He thought he found it in a tent. But there is only one place where true safety is found, and that is in the presence of God. You may be running today, running from something, running from someone, running from a version of yourself you don't want to face. But God is not chasing you to destroy you. He is calling you, the way Jael called Sisera. Come in. Don't be afraid. Only this time, what waits for you inside is not death. It is life. It is grace. It is the God who has been working on your behalf since before you knew you needed him. The war ended not with a great army, but with a quiet act of courage in an ordinary tent. Your story may not look like a battlefield, but God is still moving. He is still using the unexpected. He is still delivering his people. And he is not finished with you yet. Based on Judges 4-5.